flow on, sweep away my pain, bring your healing to my heart, help me love once again. Cares and worries get me down, fear of failure fills my day. When I'm lost and all alone, help me, Lord, to find your way. People knocking at my door, strangers seeking love and care. Never let me turn them down. Teach me gently how to share. Children, come into my life with your laughter and your song. When will I become like them? Teach me, Lord, to sing along.
Hello friends, and today, as we had mentioned yesterday, we will deal with Joshua. First of all, we are familiar with the book of Joshua, I hope. Okay, one thing to remember, as we are going to see through the biblical text, make it a point to read the text beforehand. And the text of Joshua we may cover within 4 or 5 classes, 5 days. And you can read it within that time using the free times that you get, okay, when you are not working or when you have leisure time and so on. And because if we know the text, if we have gone through the text, that will help us tremendously. And that is the reason why we need to read the Bible also together with the classes. Okay, and another thing, when you read the Bible or a biblical book, and if you have any doubt, you can send it by email to Logos, and I will try to clarify as far as possible. All the questions may not be clarified to your satisfaction, I know, but we will try the best. And if there is any doubt, that can be taken up towards the end of the session on one book, we can say. Or similarly, with regard to the other books also, we can do the same. Okay, now about the book of Joshua, we know the book of Joshua is said to be a part of the first 6 books according to some people. The first 5 books usually we call Pentateuch, and Penta means 5, Teukos, both are Greek words, is book, 5 books, Pentateuchos, Pentateuch. And instead of Pentateuch, some people speak of a hexateuch. Hexa means 6, H-E-X-A, hexa. Hexateuch, 6 books. That is, they consider Joshua also together with the Pentateuch, and thus they have called hexateuch. That was an opinion very prevalent in the early centuries. Some of the church fathers had held this opinion and they were advocating this. Okay, and now we can see the Joshua, the leader and the hero of the book, is not so great or not presented as a great hero in other books of the Bible. Joshua is rarely mentioned in other books of the Bible. Only in the book of Joshua, Joshua is presented like a great hero. In other books, practically there is no reference to him, and if at all there is reference, he is just presented as what's called as a shadow of Moses, one who follows Moses in his footsteps. That's all. Therefore, the importance of Joshua is so greatly narrated in the book of Joshua. This is something special with regard to the book of Joshua. And the author of the book of Joshua, as we said earlier, it's the final author, the Deuteronomistic author. Who drafted the book early, we do not know. But the final author, we can say, Deuteronomistic author. And the date, the final date may be around 550 BC. That is during the exile, the middle of the exile, around 550, when all the books were rewritten. Therefore, that is usually considered to be the date of the book of Joshua. Then, what was the purpose of the book of Joshua? The main purpose of the book of Joshua is this: to prove that Yahweh has fulfilled his promises and he has given the land that he had promised into the hands of the people of Israel. Yahweh has fulfilled his promises and handed over the land to the people of Israel. Therefore, the book shows clearly how Yahweh executed his plan. We find the story narrated in the book. The first 12 chapters, we find the story of the conquest of Palestine, and the remaining chapters give the story of division of the land among the tribes and among the families. Therefore, God has fulfilled his promise. For that is the most important purpose of the book of Judges, book of Joshua, we can say. And the name Joshua means Yahweh saves. The word Joshua means Yahweh saves, or Yahweh is salvation. Yahweh saves, or Yahweh is salvation. That is the general implication that we can say about the book of Joshua. And we also find some other purposes with regard to the book of Joshua. And the purposes, we can say, the promise of Yahweh is dependent on obedience and fidelity of the people. That is, Yahweh gave them the land, but to retain the land, they should be faithful and obedient. Otherwise, the land would be lost. That is the warning given in the book of Joshua. Therefore, the book exhorts the people to be obedient and faithful. Otherwise, the land given will be lost. Therefore, this is another important theme or purpose that we find here. And we also find the picture of an ideal Israel depicted here. ideal Israel. What does it mean? Under the leadership of an unquestioned leader figure, and here it is Joshua. All the people follow him, and everything is safe and secure for them. Yahweh fights for them and gives them the land. So easy conquest is narrated. Therefore, everything is done according to the plan of God. And hence we can say, in the book of Joshua, unlike in other books, we find a very beautiful picture of ideal Israel and ideal leadership. The picture of ideal Israel and ideal leadership. For this is what we can speak about the purposes behind writing the book of Joshua. Okay, and now we go to another dimension about the book of Joshua, and that is, we can say, first of all we are to understand about the land of Canaan, about the geography of Canaan, and what is to be said about it. First of all, we are to define what exactly is the place that we call the promised land geographically, or where is this land, the site promised by Yahweh that he would give Father Abraham or his descendants, and where it is. To explain this concept, we can say the land of Canaan can be understood in three different nuances or different senses. The first would be the broadest sense, and broadest sense. The second would be the broad sense, and the third would be the narrow sense. Okay, what is the meaning of saying land of Canaan in a narrow sense? This would imply the piece of land lying between Mediterranean Sea on one side and River Jordan on the opposite side towards the east. Therefore, in the west, Mediterranean Sea, in the east, River Jordan. The piece of land that lies between these two is called the land of Canaan or the promised land. Since it is described as a narrow area, we call it as a narrow understanding, narrow vision, because from the book of Joshua itself we understand the land on the other side of River Jordan was also occupied by the tribes. Hence, the land was spreading towards the other side too. Anyhow, this is the meaning of narrow sense. Then, the land of Canaan in a broad sense, it would mean the land lying on both sides of River Jordan, and maybe on the western side it reaches up to the Mediterranean Sea, and towards the east maybe up to 100 kilometers and so on at the maximum. And it was this land that was given for the people of Israel to live. The land of Canaan in the broad sense therefore would imply the land lying on both sides of River Jordan. And then there is still one more concept, and that is the land of Canaan in the broadest sense. And according to some interpreters, the land of Canaan consisted of the entire land between the Mediterranean Sea until in the eastern side by the side of rivers Euphrates and Tigris, that is the present Middle East. Up to that, the entire area is called or meant by the land of Canaan, and that is usually said to be in the broadest sense. how can this concept come to be, since the people of Israel never inhabited this land totally? And the reason for saying this is this: during the time of King David and later at the time of King Solomon, we had already mentioned that there were no powerful kings either in Egypt or in Middle East. That is, Assyria was ruling in the Middle East and Pharaoh was ruling in Egypt. But at this time of history, both the kings or both the emperors were weak, and they had no power over the kingdoms which were usually the vassal kingdoms of both countries. And now at this particular time, we see David was able to conquer all the enemies around him, and Assyria was not strong enough to encounter David. And hence, it is supposed that David had an effective control over the entire area. Effective control in the sense that at least some of the kings in the area made a treaty with David and gave him the tribute. And they had their independence by paying the tribute in a way. And this custom was followed at the time of Solomon too. And based on this fact, there are people who would argue that the land of Canaan is very extensive. When we say it spreads to such an area, it would mean the land of Canaan would have the width or breadth of almost 2,500 kilometers. And this is the argument behind it. Therefore, this is what we are to understand about the geography of Canaan. And with regard to the administrative setup, what are we supposed to say? In the land of Palestine, we can see that they were usually agriculturists, the land of Canaan. And there was a speciality about it. The central part of Palestine is a fertile land because River Jordan flows through the middle of the land. And every year or year by year, the land gets flooded practically on both sides of River Jordan. And this area is usually called by the name the Plains of Jordan. And this area is usually very fertile too because of the flooding. And that was the best soil for cultivation. And the Plains of Jordan, some people call this land as fertile crescent. Crescere is a Latin word which means to grow. Therefore, fertile crescent, a land that would help to grow fast. And this area was called fertile crescent. According to some other authors, the entire Palestine area was called the fertile crescent. Okay, therefore, we cannot precisely say this area is meant by fertile crescent. And then On one side of the, we know from the near the side of Mediterranean Sea, there were very high hills going up to 3,000, 4,000 feet in height. And from the sea side, or from the level of the sea, there is a descent going up to 3,000 feet. And we know the story. Jerusalem was practically above the sea level, but Jericho, it was a town practically below the sea level. And we know the river Jordan, it flows from the sea level, because we see it is flowing almost at the sea level in Gennesaret, Sea of Gennesaret. But later, when the river Jordan flows down, it goes to or it flows into Dead Sea. And Dead Sea, by the very word we understand, there is no living organism in it, because the water that comes to Dead Sea never flows outside. There is no way out, and hence the water becomes stagnant. And since no much fresh water is to come, we find the waters in Dead Sea again become polluted, and not only polluted but become very thick and concentrated with minerals and so on. And that is the usual way why, and that is the reason why it is said to be Dead Sea, no living organism, no grass underneath the water, because it is just like the clay soil. And this clay, now it is used for what is called the mud bathing. The soil is spread all over the body, and the people are asked to sit in the sun for some time. Therefore, the therapy, the mud therapy or soil therapy is being done, because this soil contains many minerals, and that too a lot. Therefore, this is said to be the speciality of the Dead Sea. And the water in the Dead Sea is said to be almost 10 times saltier than the sea water, 10 times saltier than the sea water. And the water is very thick and concentrate, we can say, due to the presence of the minerals. Therefore, this is what we can say about river Jordan, and also about the Dead Sea. Okay, and in this area, on one side the hills are there, in the central area there are the plains, and in the rest of the area there are small hills. And when Israelites came to occupy the land, being nomads, they opted for the hilly areas first, and the plains, they were not very much fascinated by this. The reason, since they were nomads, they had plenty of cattle, and what they wanted was the grass and so on for the animals, and that they found so much in the hilly areas. But the plains, that was the best for agriculture, but that was not occupied at that time, and therefore we can say this was the way how it went on. And then we see the people lived mainly in these hilly areas, and there was no much population at that time. Okay, the city states or the city centers or the capitals of the small kingdoms that were there, they were conquered by Joshua, and the outward area outside the capital city, it was practically left open, and the people began to settle down in this area. That is what happened. And after settling down there, only gradually they started with agriculture. But then there was a problem, and that problem is one of the reasons why they fell into sin and so on. And what was the problem? We will deal with it later when we come to deal with the deity of Canaan. Okay, and now the people began to live there in the hilly area, and in the plains, of course, there were some people, but not many, it is said. And now, what was the social setup here? We can say there were many small nations or countries there within Palestine. Okay, I think you had to look at the picture of Palestine that is given towards the end of the Bible. You will find there. And Joshua conquered the promised land. A long list of the kings conquered by him is given in chapter 12. I think 31 kings were conquered. And when 31 kings are conquered, see, the important kingdoms were not at all touched by Joshua. And which are the kingdoms that were not attacked by Israelites? And one of the things we can say, in the west side there is Philistia, nearby the Mediterranean Sea. Then towards the south of Palestine or Israel, we can say, there we have Amalekites. Therefore, the Philistines, Amalekites, then we have Edomites towards the west of Dead Sea. Edomites, let us remember, they are the descendants of Esau, the brother of Jacob, son of Isaac. And then on the eastern side of Dead Sea, we have Moab, the Moabites. And Ruth is from Moab, you will see. And then to the north of Moab, there was Ammon or Ammonite. Thus, the west, we can say the west, the south, and the northeast. Not northeast, southeast practically are filled with this area. And therefore, we can say this was practically the way how the situation or the geography went forward. And in the north, we have Syria with the Damascus as capital. And we know then towards the northwest, there would be Tyre and Sidon. And all these were mighty countries. Then why Israel did not defeat them? The reason is, we already explained earlier, that Israelites had only sword and spear or bow and arrow, things like that. But many of the other nations had better military equipments. And we know, when they had better military equipments, we see there was the problem that Israelites cannot attack and defeat them. They had chariots, for example, and hence Israelites did not go to attack them. Therefore, within a short area, or it is not very wide practically, maybe about 300 to 400 kilometers in length and 100 to 150 kilometers in breadth. That was all. And there were 31 kings who were ruling. Then we can imagine what the size of a kingdom would be. And therefore, it was practically a very small area that the king had to rule. And they had their capital city, and that would be, city does not mean extensive city, but maybe 5 acres of land or 10 acres of land, that is all. But they will be protected with a city wall and so on. And the king and others lived within the city wall, and the ordinary people lived outside the city wall. And this is what we see about the geography of the land of Palestine. Okay, thank you.
Loving God, we thank you for the blessing of reading your word together. We ask that these words of life, truth, and hope would continue to impact us in the days ahead. May your love and grace follow each of us, refreshed and blessed by you. Amen.